What's up, guys? MC Stu here, and as promised, tonight we're going to go over the Beam Fire at Will build with the event ship that we just got, or I just got a couple days ago. I think today or tomorrow is the last day for the event, so I hope everybody took advantage of that and got it. I know I don't think the console players have this yet, but you guys will most likely be getting this event in the next month or so. You guys are normally just a little bit behind us. So I went ahead and used the beams that we got from the event as well, and what I put together on this is just a fun Fire at Will build. I've had a lot of fun flying this around. The ship handles great, and Fire at Will, as I've mentioned before, it feels right. You know, beams coming out of every which direction and hitting everything. It's very similar to what we saw on screen and those kinds of things. It just feels good. Now, with that being said, this build is not going to break any DPS records or anything like that, but that's not the point. So on this one, we're just having a good time and putting together something that still works. You can play advanced content with this. We're going to run it through a Wanted Argala patrol at the end to demonstrate. I did run it through a couple of ISEs just to see how it stacks up, and I was getting in between 100 and 150k out of it, depending on who I was dropped in with and how the overall run went. So even by those standards, it's definitely a viable build. If you're looking, like I said, for a meta build or something that you're potentially going to break records with, that's not this, and that's not the point of it. So before we jump into it, as always, I want to say thank you to everybody that subs to the channel, comments, rings the bell on my videos. It's extremely helpful, and I really do appreciate it. All right, well, let's go ahead and take a look at the build here. And this is also what would fall under a budget build and not a free build, at least in terms of the traits. So most of the top end gear in the game you get from the rep mission drops. Some of it comes off of ships on the very min max high level. So more of it will, but the majority of the gear on most of the builds are going to come from your rep system or the lobby store or that kind of thing. So this is a budget build. It uses only C-store traits on this and things that you can buy off the exchange in terms of the personal space traits. All right, let's take a look at this. I still need to clean up this inventory. It's a disaster. All right, so here we go. We'll start off with the beams that we have here, the Agony Phasers that we got with this event. I am using 5 of them. From that, so I still have a few boxes left. I may pick up some cannons or something with what I have left over. It would be really cool if there was an Omni Beam option in there, which there is not. But in any case, these weapons are pretty good. In fact, I had a set already on my tanking character that I use on her. They're good for that. They're good in general. I mean, when you look at, say, like a phaser, one phaser's not better than another, even considering the procs. The procs are so low. I mean, they're nice when they go off, and if you're doing very specific things, they can be helpful, but you're not going to see any kind of massive numbers from one run to another with different flavors of phasers. But these ones look good. They're very, canon-esque, at least from the next gen show and that kind of thing. So we're using 5 of those, and the first slotted item here is going to be the Terran Task Force Phaser Beam Array. This comes from the Terran Task Force rep, and it is excellent. So this scales with the hull of the enemy as it goes down. The hit points, the damage output of this goes up. Excellent weapon. Next, we're using the Quantum Dark Matter Quantum Torpedo, as always, along with the Lorca console. The 2-piece is for the stacking critical severity. Every crit hit that you get gives you 1% extra critical severity, and that stacks up to 25 times. And as long as you're continuing to hit crits, that timer will reset. And so basically, duration of combat, you're going to keep all of those stacks up. The torpedo is an excellent torpedo on its own. The console is an excellent console on its own. And that's why there's probably not many videos you've seen from me, at least, well, if you discount the mission drop only builds, where this set isn't on there. There's virtually none of them. Space set, we're using the same standard space set here with the colony deflector for the critical chance and critical severity. We are using the competitive engine, and this is for the flight and speed turn rate and tactical bridge officer cooldown reduction anytime you click a firing mode. There's 3 different flavors of this engine, so you can get it for science and engineering as well, where it'll have same kind of procs but in the flavor of that class. Next, we are using the Discovery Core along with the Tilly Shield. This is 2-piece. The 2-piece gives us a huge regen amount to our passive ship regeneration, hit point regeneration. The core is, like I said, it's not like the best core in the game. It's not the worst core in the game. It's solid. With the 2-piece, it makes it worth using. The shield is worth using on pretty much everything, unless you're doing, say, like a science build and you needed a 2-piece set from like the temporal set or something like that. The Tilly Shield is going to give us a debuff to the enemy's shields with our weapons. And as I was saying that, I was looking to see, because my shield power is always really low, and I just realized the ISA and the Argala that I ran before this, I had these power settings, which are not optimal for my weapons, and I still did 100k in that ISA, which is kind of surprising. So we'll have to go ahead and rerun that with the power settings set like they should be, which for beams, we should have that maxed, and then myself personally, I like to have engines all the way up next. This is a personal preference. I like to be able to move fast. I enjoy flying the ship fast, and this ship can move too. But you could, put a little bit into shields if you wanted to get a little bit more out of this debuff here. It does scale with the shield power, but the scaling is not very big. So right now I'm getting 11.5 increased damage to shields, and that's with the shields turned power all the way down. So just so we can take a look at this here, if we crank that all the way up, we are going to be at 20%. So we're losing about 9% having it all the way at 0. So it basically starts, at half. So if this was at 0, we're going to be at 10%. You're getting a bonus with no shield power going in. We have a little bit of bonus shield power happening from some of the consoles that we have. So we're getting the 11.5 out of that. And I will say too, and we'll get into this a little bit more when we look at some of the engineering consoles, Fire at Will build is going to attract a lot of attention. So I had to make some sacrifices from how I would have built this if it was, say, a beam overload, because you could literally change one of the traits and Fire at Will for beam overload, and this build would work for that. But you would be kind of over tanky or over resistance, built. You wouldn't really need it as much because you're not going to get focused like you would on a build like this where it's Fire at Will. If you're running patrols and you're running, story missions, that really doesn't matter because generally you're going to be the only one in there. But just bear that in mind when you're running Fire at Will, especially in groups, TFOs, you're going to get noticed a lot more regardless of how much damage you're doing because you're hitting so many more targets at once. All right, so on the back, we have the 3 event weapons that we got, Agony Phasers, and then I am running the Trilithium Enhanced Omnidirectional beam array. This comes from the mission Beyond the Nexus. This is here. Number 1, it's a free Omni you can get from a mission drop, and it's Phaser, obviously, which matches the build, and the proc that's on it gives us a possibility of increasing the fire cycle haste. So basically all your beams firing faster by 10%. It's only a 2.5% chance, but when that does go off under Fire at Will feels even better because not only are beams coming all over you out all over your ship, but they're coming out at 10% faster, and you can really tell when that's happening. Now I am using this with the 2-piece, so the console that comes from that same mission. And this is kind of serving 2 purposes. We're getting some power transfer rate, which isn't a huge deal, but it's giving us a decent amount of extra hull restoration and hull capacity. So again, survivability, we need to pay a little bit more attention to it than I normally would on, say, a cannon scatter volley, a Torp build, or a beam overload build where they just do a lot more damage, so you can take things down quicker and you're just not hitting as many targets, a maximum of 3 or 4 at once, as opposed to everything that is in range of you with Fire at Will. The 2-piece on this is giving us some additional fire cycle haste, and it's also giving us some additional flight speed. So we're getting plus 15 on the flight speed, and then we're getting just a passive increase of 5% to our weapons. So by having the 2-piece, all of our beam weapons are firing 5% faster, and if we get the proc from the Trilithium Omni in the back, that's going to give us another 10% on top of that. So when that is all going off, it feels very, very good. Next in devices, same as usual, we have the Deuterium Surplus. This is here for the speed boost clicky. I have kinetic amplifiers on here, which is a mistake, and that should be... Where are they? Here we go. That should be energy amplifiers. I'm definitely going to have to redo the run that I recorded before starting this. Probably should have done it after, but that's okay. And then we are using the subspace field modulator for the clicky that gives us extra damage resistance if we get into a pinch. Okay, so in the engineering slots here, and let's just get these out of the way first. So here's the 3 Lobi consoles that I refer to every time. They're on basically every single build. I have a video dedicated specifically to these 3 here. These are basically our critical chance, critical severity boost consoles. Okay, so in this common theme, you're going to see this in pretty much all of my videos. These are my go-to. Initially, I was using, instead of the Trillium D plating, prior to that, I was using this here. This was also on the Torp build. I think I'd mentioned I was using the same console on the ship, but I decided to change it. So this is giving us a little bit of a boost to our torpedo up front, and it's giving us a nice Cat 1 boost to our phaser damage. The problem is, though, is that I was finding I was a little bit squishy. So I was dying a couple times. The resistance ratings were pretty low, and so I opted to swap that out for this engineering console. And the reason I did that is because this is giving us a plus 17.5 all damage resistance rating, so to all of them. So sitting still here, we're sitting at almost 30% on just about all of the damage type ratings here. And this is making a night and day difference from where I was sitting at prior, which was closer to 19 on most of these. And you can see that here, right? So 19 plus 17 doesn't equal 29, right? And that's that diminishing return that you hear about from people. So, you know, the plus 17, I guess that's not a plus in terms of percentage, right? That's part of your skill point, so that wouldn't necessarily translate directly in my example, but you can go overboard trying to stack the resistance ratings, and that cause problems for you. So the all damage resistance is extremely helpful. On top of that, we are going to get starship hull capacity increase. We are going to get also a shield capacity increase, and it's also going to add 7.5 of our auxiliary power to our shield power. So that's where that extra boost is coming, which is helping the Tilly shield. So this is giving us the survivability. It's also helping with the debuff that we get from the Tilly shield as well. And after switching this out, I did 2 runs after that, and dying, I wasn't having anywhere near the kind of problems that I was having before. So I'd highly recommend picking this console up. It's a great one to have, especially if you're free to play or budget play. It's a great console to fill in the gaps, especially when you don't have traits that might help reduce your threat or keep you alive. It's just a good one to have, and it doesn't cost anything. That comes from, and this one I always forget, I think it's the last episode in, is it Future Proof? Ragnarok? Maybe? Oh, I scrolled past it. Yeah, so Ragnarok Future Proof arc is where you can get that console from. Definitely recommend picking that up. All right, so we briefly just went over the Lobi consoles. If you, like I said, if you watched any of my videos, you're fully aware on that. I'll put a link in the description for the videos specifically on these. So if you're unaware, you can get all the info you need on these consoles, but I definitely recommend all 3 of these. Next in the science slot, I am using Domino. So as of right now, the only way to get this, unless you've been playing for years and played, I believe it was the winter event years back, this came on the Bajoran Interceptor, I believe. And now the only way to get it is by getting an Epic Phoenix token, and I haven't seen one of those in years. So I understand if you weren't around for that event, which I was not either. If you're looking at this and saying, "Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen," I understand. What you could use in its place is going to be the M6 computer. And I have a whole video on this as well. I actually compare the M6 computer to the DPRM. But in reality, it's actually a lot closer to what you get, at least from the clicky standpoint, on the Domino. So that's an option if you don't have it. Let's take a look at the domino and see what we're getting here. So it has a passive plus 15% phaser damage boost. We're getting plus 20% accuracy rating, which is helping, especially with the beam fire at will. For the clicky, what we're getting is for 10 seconds, we're getting 25% fire cycle haste for all our energy weapons, which is excellent, especially under fire at will. That just looks amazing when that's going off. We're getting a plus 25% bonus all damage, Cat 2, which is always awesome as well. We're getting 25% recharge time speed plus on our bridge officer abilities, and we're getting 100% recharge speed for torpedo weapons, which is very nice with the torpedo up front. If we defeat a foe, plus 2 seconds duration to all effects. Okay, that's nice. Maximum only occurs 10 times. So maximum occurrence of that of 10 times. So if you're defeating foes, or 10 of them during that 10 seconds of this running, you could get a maximum of 20 seconds of time out of this. And then this has a 2-minute cooldown on it. And we're going to address that here when we get into the personal space traits. And down on the bottom, we talked about the Lorca console for the 2-piece, and then we are running all locators for the phaser damage and for the critical chance. And that is going to be all of the tactical consoles down here. Okay, let's go ahead and jump over and take a look at the traits. So personal space traits, I'll just name these off and go through briefly what they are. About half of these are going to be exchange items, probably a little more than half of them here, but we'll kind of look at the ones that I kind of focused on for this build, because a lot of these you can kind of switch out with stock ones and things like that, and you're not going to notice a big difference, with the exception of a couple of them and the way I have the ship build. So we have context is for kings. This is giving us either damage resistance or a damage boost, depending on whether or not we have just taken damage or not. Next, we are using adaptive offense. This is giving us a critical severity boost, maximum of 9, based off of gaining or making critical hits. Next, we have unconventional systems, and we're actually going to come back to that here in just a moment, as well as boilers, because there's a little more to explain on it. We are using self-modulating fire. Again, this is another one that's off the exchange, and the stats on it are really nice, but it can only occur once every 45 seconds, and there's no way to speed that up. I'm really considering not even using this, maybe using operative, or you know what actually would be good on this. Since I'm going to redo the run, I'm going to change it. We're going to use innocuous to reduce our threat and give us some additional critical severity. Let's do that. So that's a stock trait there. I think we're going to do better with that, especially again with the fire at will. We'll come back to boilers and these two here at the end. We have next Intel Agent Attaché. On any critical hit, this is giving us a 2% reduction in recharge time to our captain's abilities. So attack pattern alpha, go down fighting, and any of the other ones. I have these on the spam bar now because of this trait. This comes from a box. You can buy it on the exchange. I definitely recommend going after this as either your first or second priority if you don't have any premium personal space traits. Next, we are using Terran targeting. This is for the straight up passive plus 15 critical severity. We are using beam training for the extra 5% for our beam weapons. We are using good day to die. With this slotted, we are able to use go down fighting anytime for the damage resistance and the plus 50% bonus all damage. Without that trait, good day to die, you would only be able to use this ability if you were under 50% hull. So by having good day to die, that's allowing us to be able to use this anytime we want to. And lastly here, before we go back to the other two, we have Fleet Coordinator, stock trait, and this is giving us 2% bonus damage for yourself and anybody on your team, maximum of 10%. It's basically most standard TFOs with 5 people in it, you're going to be getting this boost. Let's talk about boiler, and then we'll go into unconventional systems. Boiler is basically replaced having to use Aux to Bat or even Photonic Officer. I still tend to use Photonic Officer just in case, on the off chance we don't get a good proc and this doesn't work out. But basically it's giving us a 17.5% chance to recover the recharge time of all other bridge officer abilities up to their shared cooldowns. So this is huge. It's really kind of changing the way that a lot of us are building our ships, and for me, it's really kind of throwing things off with duty officers, because before, half my duty officer slots have technicians for aux to bat, and now I'm looking at, okay, on some of these builds, what am I going to fill in those empty slots? I can't leave them empty. That affects my OCD, and so in any case, excellent trait. This comes from the Lobi store, so I would definitely recommend getting this. It is tradable and sellable, so you can buy it off the exchange. A few weeks ago during the Lobi sale, it was about 100 million, so I mean, it's not cheap. Most of these other ones that you can get off the exchange are going to run you in between 10 and 20. But if you take the Lobi, say, from this year-long event or any other event, wait for a sale, I would definitely prioritize getting this. You basically can use it on every single build on the ship. And essentially what procs this is, anytime you activate any of your bridge officer abilities, it will then have that chance, and it's a large chance, to cool down all the other bridge officer abilities. All right, let's talk about unconventional systems. So this was more of just kind of this isn't make or breaking the build, but this ship has a lot of seating, it feels like, in it. And I don't know if that makes sense or not, but it's got more tactical than I really need. It's got enough engineering. And then on top of that, you have the universal slot, and you have, a ensign science slot. So with all that kind of extra seating that I really don't need, I guess you could say, at least not on this kind of a build, I decided to use unconventional system and then really try and stack it out with control abilities. Preferably control abilities that don't grab even more attention, like gravity well, which I didn't use on here. But so let's go ahead and talk about this. So using a control bridge officer ability gives negative 7% recharge time to universal consoles. Now, this would be a lot more effective if you were using more universal consoles on a particular build, and you can take this. What we're going to talk about on this part here isn't tied to just this kind of a build, right? So you can mix this into anything that you're doing, but basically, anytime I activate a control ability, it is on this build, it's going to cool down Domino 7% faster. And so if you have at least 3 control abilities, then you are going to be able to take pretty good advantage of this. If you have less than that, then it becomes not as worthwhile to have. If you have 4 and you're timing things out right, then you're going to be able to cut almost in half the recharge time on most of your universal consoles. And that's huge, especially if you're running like on a build like this, like DPRM along with Domino. That would just be huge. Or if you're running a science build that has a lot of clicky universal consoles, and being that it's science, it has a lot of control abilities on it, then this is just really a no-brainer and makes a lot of sense to have. So let's take a look. We'll look at the bridge officer abilities that I'm using that the game considers control abilities. So I have 3 of them here, and then I have another one on the spam bar here. And I put this one on the spam bar tractor beam because the recharge time on it's so fast, right? So it's just kind of running all the time. I don't have to think about it. So let's say I use Domino, and I can't demonstrate the cooldown unless I'm in a combat zone. But let's say I click it, and tractor beam's going off whenever it goes off. Every time it goes off, once this is on cooldown, we're getting that minus 7%. Once this ability is done, so a maximum of 20 seconds, I'm going to start using these control abilities. And these control abilities are scrambled sensors. Next one is jam target sensors. And then we have emit unstable warp bubble. All of these have some sort of a slow or a hold or some sort of effect that is considered a control ability and will trigger unconventional systems. And so in the ISA that I ran, the random, it was a little longer than normal. I think it was around 3 minutes. I was able to use this ability 3 times. And if I really would have been paying attention, I might have been able to use it 4 times in 3 minutes. That's pretty darn good, especially considering without this kind of a setup, it's every 2 minutes. I would have only been able to use it twice if I used it at the very beginning and then once towards the end. But I was able to use it 3 times, and with the power of a console like this, or even the M6, which is the alternative to this, being able to use that clicky a lot more just makes a huge difference. And it's kind of fun, I think, you know, where you go and, you know, I know a lot of us, and you get some criticism as well, you know, just go out and you're just cramming the space bar. And that's true. Being able to manually kind of manage these things and do this stuff makes the overall experience a lot funner, especially on a fire at will build like this. I mean, it really is a joy to just fly it and watch it and, you know, and do all the things. So I'm really enjoying that. But the Unconventional Systems, or Uncon, is what they're calling it for short. Very good ability. It's situational, you know, based. There's some ships you just can't fit enough of this stuff on here, right? So definitely consider using that for whatever kind of build you're doing, but do know that you're going to need at least 3 control abilities. If not, it's really not worth using. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the starship traits. So what you're going to see here is the 4 traits from the video that I put out for the top 4 C-Store ships. And we'll just go through them real quick. You can watch that video if you want more detail on it, but we have emergency weapon cycle. Anytime we use emergency power to weapons, we are going to get a huge reduction in our power cost, so negative 50% power cost for 30 seconds, and we're getting a plus 20% fire cycle haste. The cooldown on this ability is 45 seconds. If you're running any kind of extra cooldown with it, you're going to be well under that. And so basically what you're going to find is that this ability is going to be up all the time. So, and it runs for 30 seconds. So this trait will be constantly going if you're in combat and utilizing your cooldowns along with this ability. This is a must-have trait. It's the first trait I would recommend for anybody to get. And like I said, there's a whole video about these 4 here, because these are good universal traits. I talked about this a little bit in the last video. What I've recommended to you guys, you know, through the beginner's guide and all of that, they're not build specific. I try and recommend things that you're going to get a lot of utility out of, right? And so that's why that's kind of a weird number instead of top 5. I probably should have made it like top 5 and included this last one, even though it's somewhat specific, but you can use it on a few builds, and it's important. We'll get to that when we get down to the end here. But all these other ones you can basically use on almost anything, and they're worthwhile, with the exception exception of probably this one and this one for science builds, right? So the next one is Strike from Shadows. This is going to give you a boost to bonus damage. It's going to give you a boost to critical chance, and it's going to reduce your threat by 60%, which is very, very nice. Very nice for science, nice on a build like this. Any kind of DPS build or anything where you're touching a lot of bad guys or controlling a lot of bad guys, that's going to be real helpful. Promise of Veracity, it's going to give us a stacking plus 4% bonus damage for the duration of combat. Anytime we use a pilot or a tactical bridge officer ability. It can stack up to 5 times. So basically we're getting 20% bonus damage out of this. And it is it's bonus weapons damage. So this would work on anything but basically a psi build. Next, we have Supercharged Weapons. This is a great trait for energy weapon builds of any kind where you're running a torpedo with it. So firing a torpedo grants 1 stack of supercharged weapons, and that's going to give you plus 10 damage. It's going to give a plus 10% bonus damage. It's going to give you plus 1.5 critical chance and 6.6 critical severity, and that can stack up to 3 times. So after you fire a torpedo 3 times, you'll have the full stacks of those. That adds up to a good amount of extra damage boost kind of across the board there. Lastly, we have Entwined Tactical Matrices. Now, this was basically the kind of featured trait, if you will, on this ship that I made earlier this week, where we were showing off the Torpedo Kinetic build. And this was a must-have for doing torpedoes. And if you're wondering why, watch the video and check it out. We're going to talk about it in the aspect of fire at will. And it's basically the same kind of thing. We're just using it kind of in the other direction. So if we look at the description here, when we activate Torpedo Spread, it is going to grant us Fire at Will 1 or Scatter Volley 1. Now we're not using any cannons or Scatter Volley, so we can ignore that part. So anytime I activate Torpedo Spread down here, I'm going to get Fire at Will 1. Well, you notice I have it in the chain with Fire at Will 3 first, right? So this is going to activate first, and you see how then that is closed off and you can't click it. And that's because by activating Fire at Will, it has done the opposite of what we just read, and it has granted us a Torpedo Spread 1. So if we look at the bottom, activating Fire at Will or Cannon Scatter Volley is granting us a Torpedo Spread 1. So if we were in combat, that spread would already have gone off, and this would come back up again. This would go on cooldown, and once this was activated, now we have Fire at Will 1. So essentially what's happening is with the cooldowns that we're having, we're being able to alternate between these two, and you can think of these two as basically two Fire at Wills, even though we are getting torpedo spreads out of both. But because they're different types of activatables, so one's for weapons, one's for torpedoes, they don't have a shared cooldown. So if this really was a beam Fire at Will 1, then you would have a longer duration that this would go on cooldown. So if we were in combat right now and I click this and this grayed out torpedo spread goes off, this immediately will light up and grant us that additional Fire at Will. So essentially by using Fire at Will and Torpedo Spread in combination with Entwined Tactical Matrix, this is allowing us to keep Fire at Will up full time. This is excellent for tanks. Tanks really need this in order to not have that gap where you have 5 seconds to 6 seconds or so of only being under a regular firing mode, especially if you're in the middle, of it getting real hairy and there's lots of bad guys and your team needs the bad guys to be paying attention to you and not to them since you're the tank. This is what fills in the gap. So this is basically how you extend Fire at Will to be up full time. Similarly, like in the torpedo build we went over, this grants us just a continual torpedo spread every 5 to 7.5 seconds. Torpedo spread, torpedo spread, torpedo spread. This wasn't in my initial video for that top C store ships and traits because it is kind of specific. It's for one or the other. But those are two big and fairly popular builds, being able to do Fire at Will or torpedo builds. So maybe we'll do an updated one in 2022, take into account anything new that has come out as well. Excellent trait, really a must-have for any of your torpedo builds or any of your Fire at Will builds. All right, let's take a look at our space reputation traits. They're actually identical to the torpedo build with the exception of we are not using the Omega kinetic shearing. So what we got here is targeting, advanced targeting systems. This is giving us plus 20% critical severity. We are using precision. This is giving us plus 5% critical chance. We are using torpedo pre-fire sequence. This is giving us a huge boost to our torpedo damage, a passive 15.6% bonus Cat 2 damage, and it is giving us a boost, 41.3% for destructible torpedo flight speed, which is not doing anything for us here because we don't have any destructible torpedoes going off. Next, we have Tyler's Duality. This is giving us a scaling critical chance based on the amount of hit points that we have. So with the way the ship is currently configured and the hit points it has, we're getting 4.8% critical chance. Sorry, I said severity, critical chance from Tyler's Duality. And then lastly, we have Magnified Firepower, which is giving us just a passive plus 6.3% bonus weapons damage. All right, so that covers our traits. Let's take a look at stations. So we've pretty much covered all of the science. It's pretty much all going to be control, tractor beam, scatter sensors, and like I said, I am using the photonic officer just to make sure Boimler's doesn't let us down. I don't have any reason to think it is. I think it just makes me feel good. It's also another clicky that doesn't have a long or super long cooldown on it, so that's helping us with Boimler's as well, being able to click that. And then we're using the jam sensors, so that covers all of our science. Let's look at engineering next. We're using emergency power to engines. That is proccing our duty officer that allows us to cool down the evasive maneuver. I like to go fast, and so that's important for me to have. So once this comes off of its activatable and it goes into the cooldown mode, if I click on emergency power to engines, you will see that'll drop to about 3 seconds and it is ready to use again. And that comes from a duty officer, which we'll take a look at when we get to the duty officer section. Next, we are using emit unstable warp bubble. Jeez. And this is basically giving us another control effect, which is proccing the Unconventional System personal space trait to cool down the usability or the cooldown on the Domino Clicky Universal Console. Last, for engineering, we are using emergency powered weapons. This is triggering the emergency power cycle trait. This is also, even without that, I would still have this here because it's giving us a 16.6% bonus weapons damage. It's giving us plus 40 to weapons power. This lasts for 30 seconds. Even with just using Photonic Officer 2 all by itself, this is basically going to be up 100% of the time. So the stock cooldown's 45 seconds and the duration of it's 30 seconds. So it runs for a long time. So even with Photonic Officer 1, you're still going to get this to be up basically 100% of the time. All right, let's take a look at our tactical. So we have Tactical Team 1. This is basically just filler. Not a big fan of Tactical Team, but there was nothing else to put there, so I put that. We're using Chemocyte Lace Weaponry. This is adding a radiation damage potential proc to our beam weapons, and since they're firing a whole lot, we're getting this proc fairly often. This proc is also 100% of a proc for torpedoes. So that is nice. We are using Fire at Will 3. Since this is a Fire at Will build, we're using the highest version of that we can. And then we're using Attack Pattern Omega. And this runs for 15 seconds. This is here for the nice damage boost that it's giving. I'm just starting to really kind of play with this. I normally would opt for beta because of the debuffs, but the plus 24.9% bonus all damage is very nice. You get a nice boost to your flight speed, your turn rate, and it also gives you a nice damage resistance buff and defense buff. So this is really kind of OP, I think, as just a basic bridge officer ability to be able to use. So if you haven't been using it, check it out, see if it makes sense. It does add quite a bit of speed and flight turn, and I know there's some that have commented they don't like that. They don't like, going real fast and have a hard time controlling their ship. And depending on the ship too, it doesn't really look right. It's not very, canon. I never saw, the Enterprise D flying all over the place all crazy like a little, fighter or something. So I get it. But it does have some great abilities associated with it. For our last tactical spot here, we are using distributed targeting. Again, this is kind of filler. If this isn't here, this isn't going to make or break it. This is a box ability. You can buy it off the exchange. This would be like last on the list. We're not getting a ton out of it, but something's got to be there, so that's what it was. And then we are using Torpedo Spread 2 because we're running the torpedo up front, and it is proccing the Entwined Tactical Matrix, and it is granting us the Fire at Will 1. All right, let's look at the specializations here. So we're using the standard strategist and intel, pretty standard for any kind of beam build that you might want to do. Let's look at duty officers. Nothing real special in here. Like I said, without being able to fill this up with technicians for Ox to Bat, I don't want to say struggling. I just haven't had the time to put in to see what else makes sense. And something that makes sense that doesn't cost, millions and millions of EC, which it probably is. I know like the Borg duty officers are really good. They're outrageously expensive. So I went with Law. This is a mission drop. Comes from the Nimbus arc. I believe it's the first or second mission in it. And it's giving us a reduction to recharge time for torpedoes since there's a torpedo up front. I'm using a couple of the energy weapon duty officers, and what they're doing is giving us a chance for critical chance. So we have a 2% chance for 1% critical chance to be added for 15 seconds, stacks 3 times. I don't know when this happens. Maybe I need to be looking for this symbol here or if it even does. Now this is green, it has a low chance. If you don't have this, don't lose any sleep. It's not going to make any difference. Like I said, I just kind of filled this stuff in with kind of whatever I had in there. This is a similar kind of duty officer, but for projectile weapons, and it has a 15% chance to give us 10% critical severity. So the critical severity ones are higher, just as a base, than the critical chance ones are, and obviously the quality is going to make a difference on that chance as well. And then we have another one of the energy weapon duty officers. This one is a critical severity. It's blue, but on this weapon flavor, so on beams it's only 3%, because these are basically the same thing, except one's for torpedo and one's for beams. The torpedo one, because it fires so much slower, they give you, compared to energy weapons, it's a much higher chance at 10% as opposed to 3. Again, if you don't have these, it's not going to be the end of the world. This is the main one that I put this on every single build, and this is the one that comes from the Phoenix packs, which you can buy with dilithium and get them pretty darn easy. And he is giving us that cooldown reduction to evasive maneuvers anytime we use emergency power to engines. So that is the duty officers. Again, there's nothing real magical happening in there, so if you don't have some of that stuff, I really wouldn't worry about it. Here's our endeavors. I'm looking okay, probably, what, halfway there or so. I don't know what the total numbers are, but it's a lot more than I got. I got a lot of the things I cared about as I'm grinding through this here, so, you know, critical severity, projectile damage, energy weapon damage, exotic, kit performance, those kinds of things. And these are huge. Do your endeavors. This is massive. I mean, plus 8% critical chance, and this translates to every character that you have. Or, you know, I always look at this critical severity, 36%. That's insane. I mean, there's not a console in the game that gives you that, but there's just a passive boost that all of your characters get by doing these. So do your endeavors. It'll definitely help you out. All right, let's go ahead and jump into a wanted Argala patrol and take a look at how this ship does. Now, hopefully my keyboard's not too loud, and what we'll do is we'll just kind of talk our way through this. So we kind of look at what we're doing for the unconventional system procs with the control abilities. Hopefully my spacebar clicking is not too loud. You see this ship really maneuvers really well, especially when you got Omega going. Like I said, I understand some people aren't really into that, and I get it. So just depends on what you like and how you like to fly it. I like to go fast, and I'll kind of take it easy, because a lot of times I'll use, you know, evasive maneuvers, not just to get around the map, but just kind of to go a little crazy. So we're going to go ahead and activate Domino for the first time here. And as you can see, it does a good amount of work. The M6 computer for the clicky is nice as well. It's definitely a viable option. It's what I use on my free-to-play since I don't have this. So it looks like Domino is off and is now on cooldown. So we're going to start using some of our control abilities here to start cooling that down. And we should see that come back up fairly quickly. So we're already down to 50 seconds. Where's more bad guys? Here we go. Thought that was an asteroid for a minute. The wrong color. Yeah, fire at will. I wish it did more damage. I mean, it probably, you know, would be unbalanced if it did. I think it's probably in the right place, but I just really enjoy the way that it looks and it feels, you know, when it's firing, going off, the sounds it makes. It's very, very satisfying. Alright, so it looks like Domino is almost back up, and we will use it on this last wave here. Get some torpedoes in here before he dies. So, and this is on advanced, it's not an elite. this on Elite, you'd really need a real top end, and depending on how it's built too, it'd need to be kind of a tanky top end. But I mean, this thing just, really just kind of mowed through these guys with no problem. So this fire at will, even though it's, like I said, it's not going to break any weapon or any records. It is more than viable to build like this, go in, have fun, run, random TFOs, advanced TFOs, basically any content in the game you can do with this build, even with it being, quote unquote, the non-meta DPS, right? And so, we hear about that all the time, and I know a lot of people aren't into that, and it's not everybody's thing, and sometimes it's nice just to do something different, have fun. My free-to-play, I got a lot of this kind of stuff, and on some of my tunes on my main account, because it's just fun to do. So I've really enjoyed, doing this build. There's not really any parse or anything to go over. I am going to test it out, I think, one more time, because the last one that I ran, I did just over 100 on an ISA random, but that was with my weapons power settings all the way down and kinetic batteries on it, which was all incorrect. So when I first ran, the first one that I ran was before I put the Torp together, build together on it, and I got about 150, which is very decent for a fire at will build. And I even died once on that because it was a little squishy before I made these changes that we went over in the build. So well, I think that that takes care of it. Don't forget about the giveaway that is going. This video will be rendered tonight and probably up tomorrow, which is the 13th. So that's going to leave about 3 days for the giveaway in the Discord server for the 4 Tier 6 ships, along with the Vanity Shield, as well as the Aegis Space Set. So definitely check that out. Again, to everyone that has subscribed to the channel, leaves comments, I really appreciate that. Definitely leave your thoughts on this video. I'm interested to hear what you guys think about it, this kind of build, and what kind of builds you guys just really enjoy, flying, what makes you happy when you're out there playing the game. Really interested to hear from you guys on that. All right, well, I think that that takes care of all of it. Again, as always, thank you very much for watching the video, especially if you made it all the way to the end listening to me rant. I think this one's a record. It's been much shorter than my last one, so I'll stop talking before that is not the case anymore. Thanks again, guys. Have a good one, and until next time, stay safe.